In a world where most people watch movies and then forget about them, two brave heroes join forces to watch them again and then talk about them. Join them in their epic journey as they go back in time, a decade and beyond, to revisit and break down films from a vast array of genres. Do these movies hold up over time? Are they classics? Find out on Retro Movie Roundtable. Starring your hosts, John Flack and Russell Guest. Coming now to headphones in your ears.
Hello and welcome to the Retro Movie Roundtable. I'm your host, Russell Guest. Joining me today is my co-host. He couldn't be here last time, but he's back with a vengeance. John, how are you doing?
I'm feeling pretty good to be here with a vengeance.
Vengeance feels good. And
sometimes.
You know what? I'm pretty excited today. We got a pretty good movie, and we have an excellent guest here today. I've known this guy for about 3.5 years now. He's one of my favorite people I've ever been able to work with. Today, joining us is DJ Bryant.
Hello there.
Hey, this is exciting. DJ's actually here in person, so he's broadcasting live from Pittsburgh. So.
In the flesh, as it were.
That's right. DJ helped pick this one. We'll get to that soon enough, but let's get to know him just a little bit here first. DJ, what was your first movie memory?
My first movie memory would probably be Back to the Future Part 3.
So the third one first.
I did, yes. Because I was obsessed with trains as a child, and that one stood out to me the most.
Do you think that started your love affair of trains?
Oh, totally. Undoubtedly. And dresses, too, because I love Mary Steenburgen as well.
Yeah, it's a nice dress in that. The favorite director of yours. Do you have a favorite director?
I would probably say Stanley Kubrick.
Okay, that's interesting.
Very dark.
Yeah, and that's very fitting for what we're about to get into today. What's the hardest you've laughed in a movie?
National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation when the cat gets electrocuted.
Yeah, that's. I'm definitely glad. The rant that he goes on in that movie also really cracks me up. Like he's yelling at his boss.
Yeah. Now, where's the Tylenol?
So, have you seen any movies lately, though?
I have actually. Watchmen most recently, The Thin Blue Line before that, and Rear Window before that.
So, which was the best?
So it was actually my first time seeing The Thin Blue Line. I really liked that a lot, and knowing kind of the backstory about that documentary actually helped them solve a murder mystery case was pretty cool.
Really? I did not know that about that movie. Let's go into today's movie. John, what movie are we doing today?
Today we are doing Blue Velvet from 1986, directed by David Lynch.
That's right. And it did pretty well in the box office. It grossed $8.5 million. So it came in at 77th in the year. This is not a mainstream take your whole family to it kind of movie. So it came in, oddly enough, in front of a family movie, or the Care Bears movie 2. One of my favorites from when I was probably 4. And Manhunter at 76. IMDb gives this a 7.8. And what's interesting here is Rotten Tomatoes actually likes it a good bit more than IMDb. Rotten Tomatoes critics give it 94 and the public give it 88%. So whatever reason, IMDb viewers are a little cooler on this than the Rotten Tomatoes public. But no matter how you slice it, it's a good movie, according to the people. Blue Velvet also received a nomination in the 1987 Oscars for Best Director. It did not win. Oliver Stone won that for Best Director. Interestingly enough, it was the only picture to be nominated for Best Director that year and not Best Picture. Before we go into it too far, though, John, have you seen this movie before?
No, this would be the first time I've seen it. I've heard plenty of references to it. I've always liked David Lynch in the past and wanted to see it, and actually that's part of why this one was selected.
Okay. Did you have any expectations coming in?
Being David Lynch, no, except that it's just going to be, let's just say, unique and probably well acted considering by its cast. But I really just tried to keep all my expectations at bay and kind of going in knowing that at least part of this is going to be a mystery.
Okay. And DJ, had you seen this one before? What were your thoughts coming in?
I did. I had seen this before. I think this is a classic. Like, I think it's a great movie. It's very dark. It's very intriguing. And the time that I found it in my life, I was interested in like melancholic films. So this fit very nicely into that whole kind of arc of film.
So I personally had never seen this before, and I had never seen a David Lynch movie before. So
really?
I'm coming in even more raw than any of you than John on this one. So yeah, so this is my first foray into David Lynchville.
Did you use protection?
I didn't know he was the weird guy or whatever. I hadn't even watched Twin Peaks. I knew of Twin Peaks. I knew about Dune. I knew about Lost Time. I knew about Mulholland Drive. Just never got around to seeing them. So, part of the reason I did this podcast is so I get to see all these great movies. So, DJ helped shortlist some great movies for us, and John picked Blue Velvet this week, and I'm really, really excited to get into it. So, before we do, let's take a quick break. But when we come back from that break, we're going to have to spoil the movie. So, little warner here, there will be spoilers that lie ahead. And if you haven't seen Blue Velvet, go watch it now and come back and listen to this episode. So, here's a word from our Commander-in-Chief.
Hello, it's your very popular and beloved President, Donald J. Trump. That's right, I won the election fair and square, unanimously. I carried all 672 electoral votes. It's true, believe me. My favorite podcast is the Retro Movie Roundtable, and while it's not as popular as I am, we can fix that. Go to iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from, it doesn't really matter. As long as it's not CNN. Give the show a rating and review. I'm doing such a tremendous job as president, I don't need your feedback, but the Retro Movie Roundtable does. It helps promote the show. It lets them know how they can make the podcast better. I gave them 5 beautiful golden stars. Give them a like on Facebook if you want. Also, email them at retromovieroundtable@yahoo.com. I made this country great again, and with your help, we can make movies great again with the Retro Movie Roundtable. Thank you.
This message was endorsed by President Donald Trump.
Oh, bless Trump's heart.
Yeah, did he actually run for president?
I'd just like to know, where did the extra electoral votes come from?
Yeah.
They were quite a bit extra, actually.
Yeah.
I'm thinking Russia, maybe.
It wasn't even a presidential election, but you know what? I'm glad he likes the show, and we'll take his endorsement, I guess. So didn't seem to help certain people in the House yesterday. So DJ, get ready to kick us off, and this is the last warning. There are spoilers that lie ahead. And also, this is a movie with some heavy content, and while we'll handle things delicately as we can, there are certainly some adult themes that are going to come up in the show. So we'll do our best to hit the middle ground, but if you're not comfortable with some of the things that get talked about, please turn it off and don't get offended.
Okay, so Blue Velvet is a neo-noir mystery thriller directed by David Lynch. The neo-noir genre is a modern adaptation of film noir, or dark film, that was popularized in the early 1940s and 50s in America. The neo-noir genre is typically understood to connote a plot that involves dark and sinister themes, but is also utilized to express a particular style of cinematography. Blue Velvet centers around Jeffrey Beaumont, who returns to his hometown of Lumberton, North Carolina from college after his father suffers a near-fatal stroke. While walking home from the hospital, he cuts through a vacant lot and discovers a severed ear. Jeffrey takes the ear to a local police detective, John Williams, and becomes reacquainted with the detective's daughter, Sandy. Sandy tells Jeffrey details about the ear case and a suspicious woman, Dorothy Valens, who may be connected to the case. Increasingly curious, Jeffrey enters Dorothy's apartment by posing as an exterminator, and while Dorothy is distracted, Jeffrey steals her spare key to the apartment. That night, Jeffrey and Sandy attend Dorothy's nightclub act, in which she sings Blue Velvet, and they leave early so that Jeffrey can sneak into Dorothy's apartment to snoop. While snooping, Jeffrey is taken by surprise when Dorothy returns home early and is forced to hide in her closet. Dorothy eventually discovers Jeffrey and threatens to kill him while wielding a kitchen knife. Believing his curiosity is merely sexual and aroused by his voyeurism, Dorothy makes Jeffrey undress at knife point and begins to fillet him before their encounter is interrupted by a knock at the door. Dorothy hides Jeffrey in the closet, and from there Jeffrey witnesses the visitor, Frank Booth, inflict his bizarre sexual proclivities upon Dorothy. During this encounter, Jeffrey discovers that Frank has kidnapped Dorothy's husband and son and is using them as leverage over Dorothy so that she will perform sexual favors for Frank. When Frank leaves, a sad and desperate Dorothy tries to seduce Jeffrey again and demands that he hit her, but when he refuses, she tells him to leave. Jeffrey relays this experience to Sandy and asks her why are there people like Frank in the world. Through some more sleuthing and amateur detective work, Jeffrey is able to surmise that Frank is part of a criminal drug ring and he employs some fairly nefarious individuals, including the partner of Sandy's father, known as the Yellow Man. Jeffrey visits Dorothy again and the two have sex. Frank catches Dorothy and Jeffrey together and forces them both to accompany him to the apartment of Ben, his suave, effeminate partner in crime who is holding Dorothy's son. They leave and Frank takes Jeffrey to a lumberyard and then he molests Dorothy. While molesting Dorothy, Jeffrey stands up to Frank by punching him. Frank's cronies beat up Jeffrey and abandon him there after Frank tells Jeffrey that you're just like me and symbolically kisses him on the lips while wearing lipstick. The plot eventually climaxes when Jeffrey returns to Dorothy's apartment where he finds Dorothy's husband who is dead, as well as the Yellow Man who bears a gruesome head wound, leaving him barely conscious and unresponsive but still standing. When Jeffrey tries to leave, he sees Frank coming up the stairs. Jeffrey remembers that Frank has a police radio, thanks to the Yellow Man, and he calls for help and lies about his location in Dorothy's apartment. Frank enters the apartment and brags about hearing Jeffrey's location over the police radio. While Frank is searching for him in the wrong room, Jeffrey retrieves the Yellow Man's gun and hides in the closet. Frank fires sporadically, knocking over the dead Yellow Man, who has still been standing up this entire time, and when he opens the closet door, Jeffrey fatally shoots him in the head. Detective Williams, gun drawn, enters with Sandy a moment later. From there, Jeffrey and Sandy now go ahead with their relationship, and Dorothy and her son are reunited.
That's right. Man, that was a good synopsis. He was succinct and thorough. I liked that. Was a good one.
There's a lot of pivotal moments. I wanted to be sure to get everything included.
Yeah, there are. And, I think this is an interesting kind of mystery where it's not you're presented with the whodunit right up front, where you have the mystery and you're going to spend the whole thing trying to find out.
Style.
Yeah, where like you're searching for this answer. It's a mystery in that you find a thing and you don't know what that is, and then you find that, but when you find that, it just leads you to another thing and to another thing and to another thing. So it's like a Hansel and Gretel situation where it's like, breadcrumbs, or like that Family Guy episode, like where there's like, ooh, a piece of candy. Ooh, a piece of candy. Ooh, a piece of candy.
Exactly. It's one of those things. You'd think that you'd find at the beginning this ear, and it's all about finding whose ear it was and what that case is, but it really just delves into so many more things as the film moves along.
And it's overwhelming the first time. I definitely had to do this one more than once, and I get the feeling that it's the kind of movie that you return to again and again and get more and more out of.
Oh, totally. Over time, you find more little clues and little secrets hidden in there.
Yeah, and we'll get into the direction here in a little bit, but before we do, let's go take a quick cast rundown so we know who the players are. John, do you want to take us through the cast?
Absolutely. So we have Isabella Rossellini before she needed her everlasting serum from Death Becomes Her, playing Dorothy Valens. And Kyle MacLachlan plays Jeffrey Beaumont, who is the David Lynch favorite. Dennis Hopper plays Dennis Hopper, also known as Frank Booth. Laura Dern, before she takes on dinosaurs, which was probably easier, plays Sandy Williams. Hope Lange plays her mother, Mrs. Williams. Dean Stockwell plays Ben.
Man, he
got quantum leaped in there sometime. George Dickerson plays Detective John Williams, also the father of Sandy Williams, played by Laura Dern. Priscilla Pointer plays Mrs. Beaumont. Frances Bay plays Aunt Barbara before she donned a kiss mask in Happy Gilmore. Jack Harvey plays Tom Beaumont. Ken Stovitz plays Mike. Brad Dourif takes a break from playing a killer child's doll as Raymond. And Jack Nance plays Paul.
A lot of good people in there. Is Brad Dourif creepier as Chucky, or is he creepier here, standing in the corner of a living room, just holding up a snake in the air for no reason?
I think Chucky.
Where does he get the snake from? Like, this is the strangest brothel ever. I don't know.
Well, with Brad Dourif in all the movies I've seen him in, maybe he can just manifest things out of midair. I mean, he is in Lord of the Rings.
He's creepy there too.
Yeah, so maybe he's a wizard in disguise.
John and I are from West Virginia, so call out to I guess very creepy honorary West Virginian Brad Dourif.
But a wonderful actor.
Yeah, he is a good actor. I'm sure he's not as creepy in real life. I hope not, anyway.
John, I'm so glad you made the connection with Isabella Rossellini and Death Becomes Her. That is one of my favorite cult classic films ever.
Oh, I love it.
So beforehand, DJ unloaded a mouthful. What's her full name again?
Her full name, it's quite lengthy. Isabella Fiorella Elettrata Giovanna Rossellini.
He didn't read that either. He just, boom.
Imagine saying that when you're pissed off to your kid. Like, screaming that out.
That's true. Your parents always say, like, Russell Stephen Guest. Urgh. Although my mom always messed up and would, like, call me by somebody I'm not, like my father or something. Like, so like Stephen Tracy or whatever. It's like, so it's like, who are you? And don't lie to me. I know where you live.
Well, you kind of took the words out of my mouth, but my mom would always call us by the wrong names. What if she had siblings that also had those long names? Did the mom remember all of them?
Yeah, and her mom's famous too. It's Ingrid Bergman. So couple casting notes to share. Kyle MacLachlan and Brad Dourif, Jack Nance, and Dean Stockwell are all in Dune, which came out just 2 years prior to this, also a David Lynch project. So David Lynch is putting the band back together. So another thought on the cast there is David Lynch actually wrote the part of Dorothy, which was Isabella Rossellini's role for Debbie Harry. And Debbie Harry was sick of offers to play the weirdo, as she put it. And she had played a character in Videodrome in 1983 and just turned it down. Plus, she had a pretty strong music career going for her at the time. So kind of interesting to think what it might have been like with Debbie Harry of Blondie. And some other considerations for the Dorothy role, according to the internet, which is always 100% factual and, take it with a grain of salt.
Always.
Always. Hannah Sergoya, Helen Mirren, which I've seen more than one story of Helen Mirren being very close to getting the role, and that's when Lynch met Isabella Rossellini. So I think Mirren was very close to being selected. Karen Allen, Rebecca D. Mornay, Jodie Foster, Angelica Hudson, Diane Keaton, Sybil Shepherd, Sissy Spacek, Deborah Winger. All of these were considered for the role of Dorothy. So according to the internet.
Quite a list of considerations.
Yeah, there's some of those that I think would have been interesting. Some of them that I don't know. Some of those, I think Jodie Foster would have been too young at the time to do it. Am I wrong? And I can't picture Sissy Spacek doing this.
That one's difficult. Angelica Houston would be interesting. I don't know how well she would handle it.
Diane Keaton, I really can't understand. Like, she's always like, oh shucks, I don't know, dark role. So I don't know about you, John. If any of those names are interesting to you, but I think they made a good choice.
Oh yeah, absolutely a great choice, and honestly, and I'm sure we'll get to a lot of them. There's a lot of interesting casting, missed opportunities or opportunities that we'll be discussing.
Yeah, are there any other ones you want to go into?
Well, one that I thought was interesting, especially it being the 80s, is that Molly Ringwald was offered one of the roles, and her mother, it was the role of Sandy, did not want her to do it due to the graphic content, and so Laura Dern was casted.
That's odd, though, because Sandy's character is pretty wholesome in this.
Yes, exactly. I was like, that. If there's a wholesome character in this film, it's her.
She came out okay, though. She did Pretty in Pink that year, so. I
think it was probably like slutty by proxy, like
okay.
Protect the children.
Yeah, don't pick up what you see in this movie, kind of thing. Shield your eyes. So another interesting moment is Stephen Burkhoff was David Lynch's first choice for Frank Booth. When he rejected the role, he said it was nothing but in the part but destruction. Harry Dean Stanton also turned down the role for being too much violence. And apparently Willem Dafoe was also considered to be Frank Booth. I think that would be even more terrifying. I get crazy off of Dennis Hopper. I think Defoe would just be frightening.
And that's why I said Dennis Hopper played Dennis Hopper. It's kind of like Gary Busey. You know, he plays Gary Busey.
That's actually a good comparison, actually.
Very good, yeah.
I didn't think about that. So let's, good cast there, but let's talk about the film creation here a little bit. DJ, what do you think about Lynch as a director, both on the whole of his career as well as here in Blue Velvet?
Well, so where does one begin with David Lynch? Like, there's a lot to unpackage here. He is a character in and of himself. I think his educational upbringing is very interesting because he started off going to like painting school, an interest in drawing, and that doesn't work out very well for him. Him and some friends dropped out of school and were going to go study painting by an expressionist painter in Europe, which was supposed to be like a 3-year kind of like study abroad thing. It only lasted 15 days. It was a complete failure. He comes back to America, attends the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts, and then he produces his first short film, 6 Men Getting Sick 6 Times in 1967. And what gave him the idea for this was the desire to see paintings move, as he framed it. And I see this very similar to Warhol and his trajectory going from the screen printing to the kind of underground films and whatnot, that he had said all he could say with one medium and moved to the next. So taking this to David Lynch's films, like, they're very atmospheric and dark and intriguing.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought the art school background up, because he is hailed as one of a very creative and artistic director, and more than once he doesn't hit you over the head with things. He's challenging the viewer to see things. He's very symbolic in nature. So.
Very, yeah.
John, you had a little exposure to David Lynch that I don't have. Any thoughts on him as a director on the whole of his career?
Well, I mean, kind of as already pointed out, I feel like he's probably one of the more complex directors out there, like more complicated than a Rubik's Cube, really. And I feel like I could read books and books about the inner workings of his mind. And he always has these very, as I said, unique is really the best word I could think to say of filmmaking style. But I like in this case, there's a bit of an autobiographical feel to it. You really feel like a lot of David Lynch's inner mind is really coming out in this film in particular. Whereas Dune is, a very well-known book, not as much way to express his own inner feelings on things. Here he really gets to let himself go.
So, as DJ pointed out with his earlier background, where this places in Lynch's career, this is the 4th movie he'd done. He had done Eraserhead in 1977, which was surrealist. He definitely gathered some. He turned heads with this one, and The Elephant Man in 1980, and then, as John mentioned, he goes into Dune in '84. Big movies probably actually aged better than it had at the time. That was viewed as a failure. So he's actually coming off of a bit of a perceived flop. With Dune, and does Blue Velvet here in '86.
Going back to your point, John, like, I do sense that he is still struggling at this point, like, of who he wants to be as a director, and this relates to Jeffrey's kind of struggle with who he wants to be as a man in real life, and I think that's pretty interesting. Like, you see like his certain thematic structure getting kind of concretized in this film that he's going to leverage later. Whereas Eraserhead was a little bit more of, that was his kind of knockout role, or first film, like it was its own thing and unto itself.
Absolutely.
Yeah, very good point.
So the producer, Fred Caruso, despite Lynch's previous film of Doom, and as I mentioned, not doing that well, got another producer, Dino De Laurentiis, showed an interest in Blue Velvet, and so he had faith in this project when many others didn't want to touch it. And so the budget was originally $10 million, and Lynch agreed to cut the budget and his salary so that he could have more artistic control of the movie. The only condition that De Laurentiis put on him was he insisted that the film be no more than 2 hours long. DJ, how long is this movie?
It is exactly 2 hours long.
Coincidence? I think not. The budget was cut down to $6 million from its original $10 million, which is good because it made, as we pointed out, $8.5 million. So it still turned profit. So I'm sure everybody's happy that he got the control that he wanted. So everybody wins in this one, and it turned out for a win. And so, this movie was originally a lot longer than 2 hours, but he had to work to cut it down, and it still works at its 2 hour format. So, John, any other thoughts there on some of the? What about maybe some of the cinematography? Do you have any thoughts on what Lynch's camera work?
Well, I think he right from the beginning we kind of see his style. You kind of don't know what's going on. It just seems like a nice, almost suburban kind of lifestyle, and you see a man collapse and you see a baby walking around, but then the zooming in on the bugs right there at the beginning, it gives you this really uneasy feeling straight from the get-go. And I just think he has a really good way of keeping you on edge. It doesn't even really describe it properly, but just feeling like you're in a sense of like you're somewhere you're not supposed to be.
Yeah, I mean that's fair to say, and both reinforced with the environment as well as with his with the camera work. Any other thoughts on what you saw with the camera work?
Back to John's point, I wrote in the director's style, a world on the precipice of entropy. So like it's this very fragile reality that is about to slip into disorder of some sort, and it's always like it's just out of your grasp. You're losing it while you're watching it. That's a pretty interesting kind of the dark underbelly of things kind of explored in this film.
And I think that like when they zoom in on the Lincoln Street thing, it's like that's really what kicks it all off, that he was specifically told not to hang out there. And that's where he wound up that first night. What
do teenagers do when their parents tell them to do something?
They do it.
The exact opposite.
Yeah, the exact opposite. So I thought there were some interesting things that I've had in doing some reading, because I don't have the large body of work that's built up, but I'll be watching for many of these things. Apparently with Lynch's work, he returns to several symbolic nature, reoccurring symbolic mechanisms that he has. And so a few of them I thought were worth sharing were how dogs signify a major turning point in the movie. And there are some of those in here. He's walking to the street with the ear to the Detective Williams house, and he encounters a man walking his dog. And I thought at the time this shot was like, wow, this guy's walking his dog. Like they're really playing that up. Well, he's about to have a big change, because he's about to meet Sandy, as well as become intrigued in the world of being a detective. So, duality is a big one to Lynch. So this movie certainly has it. DJ, how did you see the split nature of this movie?
I definitely saw it kind of coming out in the lighting, like light versus dark. You see them kind of reoccurring the candle motif, like blowing out candles or the hum of electricity. And then kind of towards the end, like the screen gets really bright and it just goes to like a whitewash.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. John, how did you, I mean, it's all over this movie. How did you see that sense of that split nature, the duality of being dark and light in the same movie?
Well, the lighting, as noted, was something that was big for me on that. But really, especially, looking at our two, kind of primary characters, in at least Sandy and Jeffrey, it just this sense of these innocent younger folks that they know they shouldn't be doing it. Particularly Sandy's character, she's saying, I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to go any further than this. And she doesn't take much convincing. And it just shows, especially with youth, how easy it is to maybe change of mind and how you might be getting into something you don't know what you're getting into.
Yeah, I think another interesting point is that Frank and Jeffrey are similar to a point. And I think that, Jeffrey's younger and is lying ahead of two roads. And Frank is the path that he could go down on one road. And maybe the other one could be more like Williams, where it's putting this fascination to use. And I think it's interesting that he finds himself questioning, as DJ mentioned, who does he want to be? Do I want this darkness? There's this exciting woman who, this is all very exciting. There's a sense of edginess and toughness to this. There's some degree of appeal from the outside when you think about it. But on the other hand, there's something very comforting and very, I would say, reassuring in the world of the light where Sandy is part of. And so it's you're caught between the strong juxtaposition and the movie, and that's something that, particularly in the second time watching through, that you see unfold in the main character.
I think that relates back to like the condition of the father, like having the stroke in the first scene. Like here's the kind of the subject of this environment, the stereotypical like suburban neighborhood, who is kind of stricken down. So like he is questioning, do I want to be like my dad or do I want to be like someone else? Like, this is my chance. Like, I'm about to be my own independent adult from here. My parents are going to pass away soon, leaving me alone. Who do I want to be? My own person.
That's interesting. I hadn't considered the full significance of the father scene in the beginning. So you're saying, in a way, it pulls out the nature of, like, my path is laid out before me. I'm going to college. I'm doing all this stuff. And the fact that I'm pulled out of college and my father's out of the picture, where am I in this world?
Exactly.
That's really interesting.
And I could easily go take over my father's hardware store and live the exact same lifestyle that he is.
Oh, okay. Okay, so it's okay. I have a feeling this is one of the ones, man, I want to go back and watch it again now, because I had that was one of my loose ends of, they're really stressing the father. And then there's another scene where he's recounting all the horrible things that happened to Dorothy, and he sees an image of his father and the medical device.
In the halo, yeah.
What do you make of that? Because that was the other piece of father. I was like, I'm not getting the father presence, and you've definitely cleared up the whole beginning there for me a lot. But what about
that coming back?
Any thoughts on that one?
John, you want to step in here?
Actually, I don't have as much. I didn't have as many deep thoughts about that one as I did the beginning of it.
Do you think maybe perhaps that it is his father is held as he's a prisoner in this medical device, and that Dorothy is a prisoner in this world that she's in?
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah,
because like his neck's braced and he can't move, and it's just a quick image of the father. So. Again, I read that Lynch is strong on emasculating the father figure and de-emphasizing it. I mean, lots of movies do this. I mean, Disney loves to have orphan characters, for instance. So interesting things happen when you're forced to grow up fast. And it's actually really interesting. This movie does that as well. So that's probably where the Disney similarities stop. Disney's Blue Velvet with music. Get a couple of singing, get a bullfrog and maybe a squirrel friend for him.
Like Mickey and Minnie Mouse with Donald Duck as Dennis Hopper.
Yeah.
I think that could work.
Yeah. Think about it, Disney. Another interesting thing DJ brought up was electricity. And for Lynch, electricity is often associated with murder in a number of his films. And sure enough, there is a strong buzz of the lighting in Dorothy's apartment, which we see other scenes in Dorothy's apartment, but it's not really up front and foremost until the late scenes when he goes in and sees Frank. And when he sees the damage Frank has caused. Frank has killed Don. Frank has nearly murdered the man in the yellow. I almost said the man in the yellow hat. Poor Curious George.
Oh.
So he nearly murders the yellow man, or effectively has, and then so this buzzing lights in there, and sure enough, he ends up killing Frank himself, which was satisfying. So.
And David loves gunshots to the head for whatever reason.
Does he?
Yeah.
Yeah. What about another interesting one was color. DJ, did you notice anything about the colors in this movie?
Oh yeah, like Dorothy's wardrobe for one stood out to me because it was very dark. She had this bright red lipstick on, this kind of like heavy blue eye makeup. Sandy was the kind of polar opposite, platinum blonde hair, beautiful kind of bright pink dress, almost like an anachronistic dress. Like it looked like it was from the 50s.
Yeah.
Like it didn't seem like it was in the right time period. And yeah, so blue, the color of secrets, mystery.
Yeah, and for Lynch, blue is secrets. I thought there was a lot of red too, like at the slow club. It sets up contrasts and to the blue. So there's moments of really white light, and again, that's that duality. And it's so there's contrast not only in color or in the tone of the characters, but also in the colors, which we'll probably talk about a little bit here, and as we go into atmosphere a little bit. But I thought it was interesting. One last thing, we kind of alluded to this as a director, how he initially had the movie at 4 hours long and had to cut an entire half of the movie out. I thought that was interesting because obviously he had a requirement to cut it down to 2 hours, but it feels really good where it does. And if you want to see some of what's missing, you might be able to look online, but there's also a 2011 Blu-ray that features 50 minutes of deleted scenes. That's a lot of deleted. That's way more than normal. Some of them include scenes at Jeffrey at college before his dad's heart attack, where he witnesses a potential date rape and stops it. Another one includes a woman at the bar, at the brothel that Frank brings Dorothy and Jeffrey to, lighting her nipples on fire. That's an interesting party trick.
Yeah.
Wow.
Who wants to see me light my nipples on fire? Put it out. So another one was you had interesting scenes inside the Beaumont household. Way more scenes of the mother and the aunt. Frances Bay is pretty funny in this. I kind of would like to see some of those.
Some more. I know. I agree.
And there's conversations between Jeffrey and Dorothy. There's a lot more of them. There's a scene where they have a more tender moment on the roof. But she also tries to commit suicide after lovemaking. Wow. Yeah, and he stops her. And they go back to being more intimate. There's a lot of intimacy between those two. They're very passionate. So, and then an alternate ending where Dorothy even commits suicide, which is, I'm glad they didn't do that. I don't know. What any thoughts on that stuff, John? I mean, I thought the movie's pretty awesome where it is, but I am intrigued to see some of these extra interactions between the characters.
Yeah, I think it's better they ended it the way that they did. I mean, it's already a pretty heavy movie as it is. I would have hated to see her end it at the end. I'd like to see some sort of relatively happy ending for her at the end. I just can't imagine it going so deep as actually letting her kill herself and not be around at the end. So I think it all wrapped up well. So
John, let's talk about where this movie takes place. John's out of Greensboro, North Carolina, right? And so we've got this movie in your neck of the woods. Why don't you tell us about the setting here?
Well, Lumberton is, a lumber town, as its name would suggest. And as we've kind of noted already, it seems like your kind of typical, mid-1900s kind of structured suburban community, nice town. But definitely this movie shows on the surface that, seems like there's a lot of nice people, nice neighborhoods. Seems like the workers at the hardware store are nice. Everybody's close to each other. But, everyone knows where the bad part of town is, as the mother points out at the beginning of the film. Don't go there. And that's where we wind up immediately.
So DJ being from Georgia and John living in North Carolina now, obviously he hasn't been there his whole life. Have either of you been to Wilmington, North Carolina? That's where this movie's shot.
I have not, actually.
Okay. John, how about you?
No, I haven't. I've been pretty close to it, like around Oak Island, but I haven't actually been to the city of Wilmington itself.
Okay. I don't know how familiar some of these scenes might feel to you in your local settings, but it's interesting. They didn't do a lot of set design per se. Most of these buildings are actually around Wilmington, North Carolina. The high school is an actual high school. Arlene's is an actual coffee shop. There's the lumber yard that they go to is outside of there. I mean, the town.
Dorothy's apartment building.
Yep, Dorothy's apartment building, the Deep River Apartments, I think it was called. Nothing sinister about that name.
I know, right?
And then I thought an interesting point about the setting to bring up is the time period. DJ, what did you think about when this movie is set?
So we kind of chatted about this earlier. I put 1980s-ish. And the reason I say that is, like, in the cars you see on the streets, you see a mixture of, like, old 1950s cars that have a patina and or rust on them at this point in time. You see newer 70s models. And then Jeffrey is wearing an earring, which, correct me if I'm wrong, but did not come into male fashion until, like, the 80s or so. Even though Mr. T did it in the 70s.
Pretty the fool.
But I said 1980s-ish is the time setting for it.
Yeah, I my initial thought was, are we in the 50s? And it just kept nagging at me the whole first time through. And I wasn't aware how stylistic Lynch was. John, what did you make of the time period? And I think it is set in the 80s, but why do you think Lynch made these decisions of using the 50s?
Well, that's a good question. I think part of it is just that it doesn't necessarily matter what time we're in, that things have always been this way, because the cars were kind of the first thing I really noticed. I was just like, these cars look a lot older than some of the other things I'm seeing, but also some of the stuff he's seeing in the hardware store. I'm like, that is stuff that was around a long time ago, not necessarily in what would be like the 80s. And maybe it's just to kind of give us a sense that, you know, there have always been underbellies of towns like this. And it doesn't really change over time. I mean, including today, most big towns of any sort, they have their dark spots.
It's true. And I was wondering, one thought I had is maybe it's like if the movie It Follows. You guys have seen that one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
In that movie, they deliberately make it ambiguous with the technology. On one hand, she's got a cell phone. On the other hand, there's a big boxy TV with bunny ears. The car's old. You know, some of the clothing is like from the 80s. And so you've got these things from as far back as even late 60s, 70s, 80s, and then obviously new. And I think that they did that in order to say time doesn't matter. This could happen anywhere, anytime, and it doesn't matter. There's certain ways to pay homage to another era. But then I thought a little more, and again, you guys can help me out on this more. Is Lynch choosing to go to the 50s because it's a comforting thought for America? Is it when, quote unquote, America was supposedly great again? When women, were repressed and it was not fun to be a minority or of another sexual orientation
yeah,
I mean, it's just... So anyway, is he going to the ideal Leave It to Beaver version of the 1950s to make you see how bright can be, which is always a false reality anyway, as John pointed out. Like, there's always been a dark underbelly. But he's pointing out this thing that sometimes we think doesn't have a dark underbelly to then contrast it with the darkness.
My reading of it is, I think, going back to, again, the father and his whole kind of questioning of masculinity is like, the 50s signifies when there was a more defined role of what it meant to be a man and masculine. There was one meaning. Like, again, you didn't have this, this diverse understanding of, well, you can be like a partially feminine kind of man and still perform masculinity. So I think that's why he's contrasting it, because it was such a totalized understanding of what it meant to be a man in the 50s versus once you get to the 70s or the 80s, after the sexual revolution, after women's liberation, all this other stuff, men are kind of struggling with, well, who am I now? What do we do?
Mm-hmm. That's an that is... and that's one of the things I'm coming to like about Lynch. It's like when you go into a museum and you see a piece of abstract art and you get to look at it for a long time and you can come away with 5 different readings of it and they're all interesting to you. And the art is also partially up to the viewer. And I don't know if Lynch intends it to be that way, but that's how I'm taking it. And I kind of like it. I don't know. Maybe I'm missing what Lynch wants me to get, but I see some degree of ambiguity that you can take certain readings. There's certain stuff that he wants you to get, and there's certain stuff that you can find within that. Is it that way for you as well, John?
Yeah, and I think that's the wonderful thing about Lynch's style is that he really does do that. And I think maybe kind of going back to what was being said, you know, the 50s was this time really defining masculinity. I mean, you can just look at even soldiers that had come back from World War II. They weren't even allowed to really talk about any issues psychologically that they would have had, that they would be blacklisted and would never get a job again, just locked up. You're supposed to be a strong-willed man. And, you know, one of the first scenes in this movie is we see this man who's had a stroke, and all he can do to his son is basically break down and cry, which at the time would be kind of unheard of.
But reasonable.
Reasonable.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting, though, that, like, as we kind of talked about the split nature of the town, it all happens across Lincoln Avenue. And like you pointed out in in the movie, like, that's when things the darkness enters. And that's the point at which it happens. So I like the duality occurring in the physical environment as well as with the characters as well. So I don't know. DJ and I are both architects, so place matters to us.
Oh, totally.
So another interesting part is, as mentioned, I want to talk about like the actual atmosphere there. Dorothy's apartment. What did you feel in Dorothy's apartment, DJ?
Oh, well, it is very dark. Like, so I was going to save this for later. We'll talk about the building. So the building is called Deep River, which typically in movie and literature, water symbolizes the subconscious. So things that you may not be quite aware of, they're just lurking beneath the surface. I see Dorothy's apartment as kind of like the embodiment of hell on earth, kind of. Like, it is this dark building. Even the staircase to it is like this chasm, this dark chasm.
You don't feel good going up the steps
at all. Her apartment's a little more hospitable, but still it's not nice. Like, it seems very cramped and claustrophobic.
The hallway between the steps was really bad. I was like, ugh.
Yeah.
Like you said, once you got in the apartment, it was a little better, but like that hallway was just like, ugh.
And it's just like right on axis of the bathroom. You just see the toilet there, like right at the end, which is a pet peeve of mine. Bad design. Don't align your toilets with your corridors. You should never do that.
John, don't do that.
Okay. I'll make sure.
So I thought that was an interesting one. But like on the flip side, John, what did you think of Arlene's Diner? Like like the juxtaposition between those kind of settings.
It just seems like I mean, you know, he asks, have you ever been to Arlene's? And she said, of course. And you know, you see it and you get there and it looks like a place you could go split a milkshake with the girl you're courting or something. It seems wholesome.
I was a little disappointed Al from Happy Days wasn't there.
Exactly. Seems very wholesome, like where good innocent things happen and teenagers could have just good clean fun. Very, very happy place.
No hanky panky.
Yeah. And then it was interesting. I also, if you contrast like Jeffrey's parents' house, it seemed super dated in a very earthy tones kind of way. So like I didn't get 50s brightness there, which why do you think that is? Either of you?
I actually don't know. What stood out to me most about Jeffrey's home was the water heater in the kitchen and not in a closet. But that's a random thing that I just noticed.
Yeah, that's one that I haven't fully pieced together. That's one piece of this I hadn't totally put together yet. And then another dark piece to contrast that with is the Slow Club, which is it's interesting when we go in there with Sandy the first time, you're like, okay, sure, this doesn't seem that bad. I mean, people are here. It's lively. But again, you look at the parking lot later as he's waiting outside, and suddenly this doesn't feel so comforting anymore. That harsh red glow of the neon sign, and you realize this isn't a super nice part of town. This is so. I think that's interesting, depending on who the character is at the time. Sandy is definitely a character of light, and even in a dark place. She brings light to it. I thought that, so.
Yeah. Well, and even there, the only, at the club, the only really, you can't even call it a bright spot, it is Dorothy, but it's really more in a kind of a darker, seductive way. It's just, you can see why it's attractive, but not in that brightness you're talking about with Sandy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you guys talked a lot already about the clothing differences between Dorothy and Sandy, and so I think that's really a good choice, or a really, really good observation. Some other things that I thought were interesting about the wardrobe, though, is that Isabella Rossellini's wardrobe and makeup is really over the top.
Heavy makeup.
And I saw that Lynch wanted to do this, but why would he want to do this? John, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think part of it is probably to really upplay her mental instability and probably insecurity. Although, really, I mean, she's a beautiful woman. She shouldn't have much to be insecure about, but clearly some very awful things have happened to her.
Including a giant big wig, shoulder pads, and like too much eyeliner.
Like, that wig was bizarre to me. Like, A, of all, I don't think it was a pretty choice for the character. And B, to take it off and to acknowledge that it's a wig during the film, like, it just kind of like hits you like, oh my God.
You're right. There's a very deliberate moment where she takes the wig off and then she puts it on like really quick.
Really quick, yeah.
But they want you to know that it's a wig? I don't know. There's a little more to unpack there that I haven't gotten to the bottom of.
But I think a lot of it just boils down to basic just insecurity, and maybe that's how Lynch is talking about how maybe certain females were made to be how they're supposed to feel at that time. She has no reason to be insecure. Naturally, she's a very beautiful woman. She doesn't need all these extra things. Yet, external people and factors, advertising, whatever, have told her this is what she's supposed to be.
Yeah, so like Jeffrey is struggling with the role of masculinity and what kind of man does he want to be. Dorothy is performing what kind of woman she thinks she should be. And exactly. The heavy makeup, the wigs, the blah, blah, blah.
Okay, that's interesting. I had chalked it up. My first thoughts, and I don't think that this is all there is to it, because like I said, it's an intentional. My first thought was like, man, 80s fashion sucked. It was like, look at that hair. And
that isn't true. I love 80s fashion, actually.
Really?
I do.
Okay.
And music, which I know you don't like, Russell.
It's also true. It's been mentioned before, but I won't belabor the point for those who do like it. But another interesting piece of wardrobe choice is Jeffrey. Jeffrey's from a bright part of town, but did you notice that he himself has like this new wave look? He's got like all dark clothes, like his shirt is all black with maybe little white dots on it, but he is dressing as a character of the darkness. And like you were saying, like, I'm from the light, but maybe I'm thinking about the dark side. I don't think that's coincidental.
I agree. And I think if I remember correctly, when Jeffrey is in full black is actually when he's in the car with Frank, and Frank tells him, "You're like me." And that's when we first see him all in black. And it's like, oh shit. Like,
yeah,
he could be.
Yeah. And my first thought when he said that, I was just like, nuh-uh. Because like, it's the protagonist. You don't want to like it. It's like, I don't like you, Frank. Don't say that. And then later on, you're like, oh, you're right. It's that two roads. And I think the character even does walk down that road a certain bit of. I mean, Dorothy takes him into that world, and I think the moment he realizes what I'm becoming is when he cries, and he hits Dorothy when they're intimate together, and this is the point where he says, "I don't like this road that I'm on," because he wakes up later after nightmares. Which, I mean, hitting a lady should give you nightmares. You shouldn't do that, and he's very upset with himself, and he said, "I don't want to go down this road anymore." And if that wasn't enough, a joyride, quote unquote, with Frank and a trip to Ben's place certainly drove the point home that this world's awful. I want no part of this. I want out of this. And I thought a big moment for him was, when he fought back, which doesn't really go well for him.
It doesn't, no.
But I mean, I think that's his choice. I think that's the choice of the movie when he chooses to get out of that. So, but back to the wardrobe. Did you notice when Jeffrey goes to the party with Sandy at the end, he has a white tie?
The pattern on the shirt stood out to me the most. It's a black and white shirt again.
Yes, but I'm saying he has a white tie.
White tie, though.
So like
yeah.
he now has there's a piece of balance back to it with that. So I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I maybe it was just an accident, but I doubt it was. So.
Well, I just liked how I read something that Lynch said that he said Kyle is dressed like me. Apparently, Lynch's father worked for the Department of Agriculture in Washington, and he was in the woods with them all the time. And by the time he had left, he was kind of tired of the woods. But he said in his mind, lumber and lumberjacks and all that kind of thing, that's still America to me. Picket fences and roses, and in the opening shot, it's a burned-in image in Lynch's brain, and he said it makes him feel so happy.
It does for many people.
Yeah.
In a weird way, I look at a picket fence and go like, you're going to have to paint that in 3 years.
Yep.
So, anyway, I thought one thing, this isn't an effects-heavy movie, but we have one major effect, certainly with the ear. How does this ear look, DJ?
I thought it looked real. What stood out to me the most about it and what has kind of burned into my memory is the green fungus growing on this kind of like pasty, opaque ear.
And bugs. Yeah. I don't know. I felt like I demand to see like the blue veins and stuff like that, like the different layers of skin and like have the uneven blueness of it. So I came away going like, I'm glad they didn't focus on it too much because it's early in the movie when he finds the ear. I'm like, oh gosh. And the other funny thing that I thought was like, yeah, you should pick that up with your hand.
Yeah. And put it in a paper bag that you just found randomly on the ground as well.
I mean, an ear's got a perfect place to put a stick into the middle of it and put it into a bag. I mean, I don't know. Germaphobe here. I saw that. I was like, don't pick it up. Oh, he picked it up. And the whole time he's like shaking Williams' hands like, did you wash your hands?
Oh, you know he didn't.
I bet he didn't. Dirty, dead ear hands on his hands. Anyway, John, what do we think about the soundtrack? There's certainly some three really big moments here. What are your thoughts on the soundtrack?
Well, I mean, I think that clearly there's a couple songs that really stick out.
Bobby Vinton's Blue Velvet is obviously a big one.
But, one that really stuck out to me, though, was In Dreams, but by Roy Orbison. Okay, yeah. With the brothel scene. And, which actually Orbison fought against using it. And then after somehow Lynch found a way to bypass the copywriting or whatever and to use it anyway. But after Orbison saw the film, he had Lynch make a music video from the film with it, and it works so well. And I find it funny that the artist really didn't want it to be in it, but then after seeing the finished product, really saw how well it fit.
There's a reoccurring theme of before the movie gets made, people reading the disturbing sexual assault that happens to Dorothy, that Frank rapes Dorothy, and there's a lot of horrible things that happen in this movie. And I think when people read the script, go, oh, I don't want any part of this. And somehow when they actually do it, and you see that the character chooses love, he chooses light over the path of darkness, somehow to me that made it all redeemable, even though that scene is really...
It's tough to watch.
It's very hard to watch. But anyway,
but unfortunately, it's reality. He's showing us parts of reality, some of the things we choose to not see sometimes, but he's kind of making us see it.
Absolutely. What do you think about Bobby Vinton's song "DJ" of Blue Velvet? It's happy and warm in the beginning. It's cold and sad when she sings it.
Yeah, I mean, I love both of the songs actually, Blue Velvet and In Dreams. The rest of the music, however, did not stand out to me as much. It all seemed to be just kind of like background songs that were involved, like not really like iconic as these two. I I do like Blue Velvet. Lana Del Rey has done a version of it,
Mm-hmm.
which I like as well. I like her as an artist. So yeah, that's it.
The other one is Mysteries of Love, which takes place at the dance at the friends' party in the basement, where they have their come together moment. Again, it's he's chosen her and she's chosen him, and it's kind of the resolution for Jeffrey. Super 80s. So a lot of synthesizer, and it's interesting that the 50s breaks tone here again. So Lynch obviously walks that line between being in the 50s and being in the 80s throughout the movie. So any moments of look for this, DJ? Do you want to go first on this one?
Sure, yeah. So we talked about the apartment building earlier. We're told early on in the film that the apartment is on Lincoln and that Dorothy lives on the 7th floor. And yet, when we first see the apartment building, we only see the first 4 stories of it. And in reality, the building is only 6 stories tall. So Dorothy lives on an imaginary 7th floor that doesn't exist.
Oh, good catch. John, look for this.
Actually, this is just fun for me because I like the show so much, but this film was actually the inspiration for Twin Peaks.
Oh, that makes sense. MacLachlan comes back to be the protagonist in that as well. So mine is the F-bomb is used 56 times in the movie. All of but once go to Dennis Hopper's character of Frank Booth, and the other one goes to Dean Stockwell. So suave. My goodness, you're suave. Anyway, DJ.
Supposedly, Dorothy Vallon's character was inspired by Judy Garland. And coincidentally, obviously Garland played Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, so you should look for some red slippers.
She does. Well, she has red heels on.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. John, look for this.
Well, kind of echo on you, Russell, but apparently Dennis Hopper said in an interview that Lynch would never actually say the F word during filming. He would simply point to the line in the script and say, quote unquote, that word. Hopper laughed, saying he can write it, but he won't say it. He's a peculiar man.
That is interesting. The character of Frank was supposed to breathe helium in the movie, which I have to wonder what that would be like. It does seem like it would break some of the tension.
You just stole mine. I was going to mention that
Yeah.
too. But...
And so Dennis Hopper, who had some drug use of himself, and they're suggested to Lynch that there'd be amyl nitrate, which he had used to enhance sexual experiences in the past. And so Dennis Hopper's own Walk on the Wild Side. Sorry if I pronounced the gas wrong.
just call it poppers.
Yeah, sure. And that's how that happened in the movie. I think that's an improvement. DJ, you got another one?
Let's see. Isabella Rossellini claims that during the initial filming of the ritualistic rape scene, David Lynch couldn't stop laughing off screen.
Jeez.
At all the weirdness of it all. Though she was baffled as to why he was laughing at the time, Rossellini says that to this day, when she sees this scene, she laughs uncontrollably herself now.
Yeah, okay.
Which I don't see how that's possible.
No, it's not funny. I'm out of John. Do you have any left?
Actually, that was my last one. I'm glad you brought it up because I can't even imagine.
Okay. Well, let's talk about how this movie affects you, DJ. Like when you watch this movie, does it remind you of anything in your own? Like, how did you take this? How does it make you feel?
Well, like I said earlier, like I found this film like during a time when I was it was just after 2008, so like stock market crash, bad time for architects, still in school here myself, trying to figure out the world, what I want to be. And I identified a lot with Jeffrey's character in this film because he's struggling with who he wants to be. And it just kind of hit at like a really interesting time. Like I was questioning a lot about reality, capitalism, work, jobs, all this stuff. And that's what David Lynch is so good at in his films is it is the dark underbelly, an exploration of the darker undercurrents of our society.
Did you feel like you had duality in yourself looking back on it?
Not like a duality per se, but I definitely like would have role played. Like I tried putting on like the stereotypical like role of the architect, like cross-dressing as an architect basically to see is this me, like does this fit?
Okay. Yeah, John, how do you take this movie? What does it remind you of?
Well, actually, I have a lot of the same things to say. I kind of identified with that, kind of not knowing where I'm going in my life, especially around that age there in your early 20s. You've got all these paths before you, and it's trying to figure out which ones to take. And it's a difficult decision. And you do feel the conflict within yourself about certain things, these dualities, if you will. But, one thing I also kind of took, and it's during the second conversation with the detective, I believe, where he's giving all the details, and he kind of mentions that it sounds fun being a detective, but the detective says it's not always fun. And it kind of gives me this idea sometimes curiosity isn't a very good thing. Like it can lead to some good things sometimes, but sometimes when you dig too deep, it might not like what you find.
Absolutely not. I'm going to go a little more of a funny tangent here. So Jeffrey in the closet watching these horrible things and the feeling of like, oh crap, like when Frank busts in and like, this is very scary, I could get caught. And even the moment when Frank takes him and like catches him, that butterflies feeling you get, like I've been caught doing something I shouldn't be doing. And it reminds me, the strongest moment of that I have had was in 2006. I was in Germany studying abroad, and I was at the Olympics Stadium in Munich, and by world-renowned architect Frei Otto. And it was getting late in the day. We wanted to get there, and so it's kind of closing up. We go in anyway. The World Cup's there, so there's some people kind of watching it on a screen or something like that. But it's definitely past, and things are dying down. We slip in. And I go into the natatorium structure with my wife Mary, but she waits, pretty much at the turnstiles. We take pictures from there. I'm not satisfied with the amount of what I can reach in this natatorium, so I hop the turnstiles. There's nobody in there, and I just start going in and taking pictures. So there's a guard who comes up and starts motioning me back to him. I kind of ignore him because my policy is always take as many pictures as you can until they tell you to stop. However, once he got a hold of me, he was a big, scary German dude. And, speaking in German is always very uncomfortable. He's like, give me your passport. I'm like, oh, no. And I'm thinking I'm going to go to jail. I'm going to go home. And so I had to sit there and, like, plead my way out of this, like, by, like, being like, I was like, I didn't read the sign and that it meant that. I can't read German, and I didn't understand that. And he was like, you didn't know that meant that? I was like, no, it's just not clear. See, in my country, we don't have that, which is a lie. We totally have turnstiles, and same thing would happen. But he gave me forgiveness, which I'm very grateful for. And we promptly left, and Mary cajoled me for going too far for architectural pictures. So, but again, Jeffrey's desire to see more, the guts that he took to go into somebody else's house. I would never actually do that unless it's a really awesome, really cool house, and I need to get in to see it. So that would be okay then. So that's my story. Time for some superlatives. John, are you ready?
I am.
Who's your MVP?
I've got to go with David Lynch on this. I mean, really, the creation of the whole, I can't even just say story, but the whole film and what it's really diving into and talking about. And, he has so much directorial control over this. Did so well on casting it. Really takes command on set. I think clearly without him, this movie, it just doesn't work and never happens.
DJ, MVP.
I like Isabella Rossellini.
Okay.
I love her in this. It's so good.
Awesome. Any particular, just everything?
Everything. Like, I think as an actress, I think, at least how I understand this film in the context of its time, I think she was ballsy to take on this role.
Yeah,
and
nobody
I
wanted to
admire
touch
her
it.
for that.
Molly Ringwald's mom didn't want her to take it.
Yeah.
Isabella Ingrid Bergman was okay with her taking it. So,
Mom, you never let me get raped.
So MVP, I gotta go to David Lynch as well. So I'm gonna echo John. The symbolism in it. I now crave to watch more David Lynch movies. This being my first one, so like I now want to go see them all. So I don't know if they're all this good. Best supporting actor, DJ.
Laura Dern.
Laura Dern. Okay, yeah. John, best supporting actor.
I got to go Dennis Hopper, playing Dennis Hopper.
Yeah, I'm gonna go Dennis Hopper too. Something is just very threatening about him. I'm not gonna lie. I actually woke up. I had a nightmare, and not it's more of a dream. Like I'd been studying this movie. I went to bed immediately after like spending like a long time doing this, and I actually had envisioned myself being in Jeffrey's shoes on this joyride, which is not a place that I would want to be because I normally have a tendency to avoid getting into trouble, and like is like, oh, this looks like it's gonna go bad. I'm out later, and so I just that looks like super uncomfortable for me. He'd be like, "Do you want to go to bed?" It's like, no,
No, I'm good, thanks.
no, I do not. So, hidden gem, DJ.
I like Frances Bay, and I actually want to see more of her in this movie.
Apparently, the deleted scenes can help you out on that.
She's a cute little old lady.
She is great. Her facial expressions of just
Oh, stay away from Lincoln.
John, hidden gem.
This might be a little bit of home cooking, but Brad Dourif. I just love him. He's got a creepy way about him. Always can convey that very well.
Well, you guys, I was very split on this, and I ended up picking Frances Bay because she has a larger part of this movie, and I'm also going to give a nod to Brad. And I've got to get it straight. Am I saying his name wrong? Dourif? Or Dourif?
I've always said Dourif, but I am not positive on that.
I've always said Dourif, so we're going to stick...
Dourif.
Once again, guys, write into the show. Is John right with Dourif, or am I right with Dourif? And help us out. We're going to keep going with what we've been doing for now, so it is what it is. Recast. DJ, if you had to recast somebody, who would you recast, and do you have any ideas who would replace them with?
This may be a stretch, but I would probably recast Jeffrey Beaumont with Matt Dillon.
Wow. Okay.
Only because I think he's sexy, and I would love to see him shirtless again. Shameless plug. But also, like, he's really good at the kind of dark, crazy characters, and that's what I wish Jeffrey's character would have shown a little bit more, is like this duality of the darkness, like struggling with it a little bit more.
Kyle MacLachlan's too nice for you.
Yeah, he's a little too nice.
Okay.
And I can't see him and not think of Sex in the City.
Okay. I haven't seen that either, so this is I don't know what I think. I don't know what I think of when I think of Kyle MacLachlan, but it'll be this now. John, who is your recast?
Well, I do really like Dean Stockwell, but honestly, I would consider recasting Ben. And I had to throw two out here. I'd like to see either Tim Curry or David Bowie try that role.
Ooh. Okay.
Yeah, I actually like both of those a lot.
Yeah.
So maybe he could borrow Dorothy's wig because it's pretty similar to the Rocky Horror Picture Show wig. So for my recast, I'm going to go a lot farther down the cast. Maybe I was just a lot more satisfied. But I'll tell you, somebody who did pull me out of it a little bit was Detective John Williams, who was played by George Dickerson. I thought that he was ambiguous, a little bit hard to read sometimes. I was like, wait, is he a bad guy? And
he was
like,
a little weird, like almost sinister.
Yeah, and like I think should be some warmth there that he doesn't convey, and also some firmness of like, you better not be pulling my daughter into this. And so the guy who I thought could do all of these things and probably has a similar physical look in some ways is Kurtwood Larson Smith, who plays Red from that 70s show. And this would be 1 year before RoboCop. So if you want to have an idea for what he looked like about this time, the villain of RoboCop. And so kind of bald, kind of looks like a dad. And I think that he is both kind, warm when he needs to be, firm when he needs to be, and mad when he needs to be, and grumpy. So I think I'm not saying literally import Red into this, but I see a much better actor there. So that's my recast. Best shot, or this is the best cinematic moment. What do you think that is, DJ?
I'm gonna go with in the first scene, the zoom into the bugs in the ground. I really appreciate that.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good one. I remember thinking, like, is this Honey We Shrunk the Kids all of a sudden? So no. The music said it wasn't. John, best shot.
Actually, I'm the exact same on that one. I just think it shows so well of going from this nice suburban scene to showing that deep underneath everything, there's lots of other things going on. Very good shot.
I thought about zooming out of Jeffrey's ear, and I thought I was going to go there, but then upon a second watch, you know what really caught me, and I actually paused the movie here. Jeffrey looking through the closet as he watches Frank enter his Dorothy apartment and take advantage of her. Well, I mean, rape her, really. And the lighting I noticed from the louvers is brighter across the eyes. And it's signifying that he sees what's through this particular louver, whereas the other ones are more faded up, and it's really good lighting. And I liked how you feel like you're in the closet with him watching this horrible thing that shouldn't be happening, and you're powerless to stop it just as he was. Because unfortunately, once you're in that position, you're not going to be like, run out there and be like,
"Can I get a Coke?"
Yeah, I'm leaving. You just keep doing what you do. So that was my best shot. And I just, from having looked at Hitchcock, I actually wanted to make one small change. Get closer to his face. Zoom in a little more on his actual face because the lighting's so good and the situation's so good. I want to impress upon like his eyebrows raising and his eyes going wide of like, oh no. So, anyway, best scene, which is different. DJ.
It's going to be the rape scene. It's the hardest one to watch in the film, but just in terms of cinematography, what's all going on there, it's like a Rorschach image. There's so much to read into it. Mm-hmm. I think it's wonderful and it's fascinating.
It's the kind of scene you never forget after you see it.
And it's
deeply disturbing. I mean, and like I said, it's a big part of Jeffrey is kind of a voyeur, and you feel that with them.
You are as the audience, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. John, best scene.
I hate to feel like I'm stealing from you, DJ, but it's the same scene for me too. I think it's really what shows us what's going on and really starts Jeffrey's journey into what it is he is going to become, and just it's well acted by everyone all around, and it is a very difficult scene to watch, but probably the most at least influential scene in the movie.
Small wardrobe piece that I missed is there's a fair bit of nudity in this, but none of it is titillating. Like, there are sexy moments where, like, she's kind of, like, older woman, kind of in control of this younger guy. But the actual nudity takes place in, like, Kyle MacLachlan's got to dash into the closet, and, like, he's afraid. Or, like, she's being assaulted and, like, beaten. And that's not sexy, at least not from my standpoint. And so it's just an interesting point to, like, the scene that you guys are talking about, that that is that vulnerability that she has and that powerlessness that she has. It there's a way. I watched it mostly through Kyle MacLachlan's eyes in the closet, but unfortunately there's another way to watch it where it's through her eyes, and that's where I really don't want to put my eyes into in this one. So
and supposedly Isabella, she was nude under the blue robe, the blue velvet robe.
Yes.
And she didn't tell Dennis Hopper this, and so when she spreads her legs and shows off her
it's
bits and pieces, he was supposedly very surprised and taken aback at first.
Yeah.
It's got to take a lot to surprise Dennis Hopper, I'd say.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I would think there'd be a spit take. Huh? Yeah, I know it's not that kind of movie, I guess. Sorry. So my best scene, I'm gonna go a little bit differently, and I kind of alluded to this earlier. I like the one where Jeffrey sees what's happening to Dorothy in the car with Frank fondling her and making her, he's hurting her and he's showing off and doing this all in front of Jeffrey and the other goons in the car. And Jeffrey has had enough. And this, to me, is the turning point of the movie where Jeffrey says, I don't want this. And he says, leave her alone. And then he looks back as if to say, are you sure you want to do that? And then he punches him, which is horribly ill-advised. But I love that he did it. It was a little moment for him to say, like, no, Biff, you get your damn hands off her. It just doesn't go as well for him as it does for George McFly. DJ, change one thing if you're David Lynch.
I kind of want some more time added. And I want to know a little more of the backstory about how Dorothy's husband and son were captured.
Yes, that's mine exactly, actually. Yeah, I thought the kidnapping was... and actually, if you read the script, the original script had it that Dorothy's husband was in drug trafficking. And he attempts to go clean and get out of the business and becomes a police informant. Frank is a criminal enforcer who is obsessed with Dorothy after he gets involved with him and, kidnaps Don not only to shut him up, but also as collateral. And then he gets to enjoy Dorothy in the sick way that he is doing. And Dorothy becomes suicidal, as I mentioned. It's a much bigger part of the parts that get cut. So... Frank started, taking over Don before all of this. Mary had an interesting theory before I found that out, though, that I thought was even potentially more interesting, is Dorothy might have been having an affair with Frank because she seems to like some of these aggressive behaviors. And I thought that was an interesting moment of maybe she had strayed from her husband, and this guy was at first an exciting adventure, but she's gone too far into the darkness herself. And I honestly like that idea.
Yeah.
So, John, we got derailed there, but...
Well, I was kind of thinking what you all were, but honestly, this might go back to your recasting, Russell. The thing that the scene I found kind of weird is when he presents the ear, the detective seems so, as a matter of fact, like, yep, that's an ear. Like... And it's just like, can you make him seem a little more urgent about it? Like, he's like,
I get a good one of these at least every day.
Yeah, it's like, oh, that's an ear. Sure, and a paper bag that you picked up off the ground. Like, it just doesn't seem like how a cop would react to that.
No, it does not. Mm-hmm. Best quote of the movie. DJ, do you want to go first?
Sure. I'm not going to say my original one because I can't say the full thing. So I have a second one, but... Sandy says to Jeffrey, I can't figure out if you're a detective or a pervert. Jeffrey, well, that's for me to know and you to find out.
That is mine as well. Good choice.
It's a clean sweep then. So that's mine as well.
I'll repeat the other one, but I won't use the word. It's flip you flipping flip.
Yeah.
There's a lot of F-bomb quotes in this movie. I did like the one too where someone's like, what do you want me to do with the beers? You want me to pour them? No! I want you to screw it! Which is a very funny response.
Well, apparently in Premiere Magazine in 2007, they rated the line, don't you effing look at me, as the number 74 greatest movie line of all time.
I saw that, which is interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know the whole don't look at you kind of thing. I don't get, like, because she did that to him.
She did.
And he did that to her. Is it just like looking at you as control? Is that a control thing?
So I don't know if we all would agree upon this, but my reading of that is that Frank is impotent as a man. Like, he can't get it up. And he doesn't want Dorothy to observe him during sex because he's embarrassed by it.
Okay. Yeah.
Another emasculating moment.
I have no... Yeah. Like I said, I'm going to have to watch it several times over to figure it out for sure. But
I only managed to watch it once, and I'm like, gosh, I got to go watch it.
You really do. Like, it's the second watch made it, like, I was, I'll go into this in a second. So before we go into the rating, DJ, is there anything you'd like to plug?
Yeah, sure. I'm going to mention here a really good documentary called The Pervert's Guide to Cinematography by Slavoj Žižek. It has a partner documentary called The Pervert's Guide to Ideology. But in it, this philosopher, Slovenian philosopher Žižek, goes into a lot of these films more in depth. Blue Velvet's one, but there's countless others. I highly recommend it.
I watched a little bit of it in the segment of Blue Velvet, and it was great. He's got a very thick accent, but he's definitely very interesting.
You can also play a drinking game with how many times he touches his nose.
So, it's time to give it a rating on a 5-star scale. DJ, what would you give Blue Velvet?
I'm going to go with 4.5, and that's just because, like I had mentioned earlier, I want to know more about Dorothy's husband and son, what happened, the backstory there. Other than that, I think this is a really well-done film. So, yeah, that's it.
John, 5-star scale.
Yeah. I'm also going with 4.5. Yeah, I do feel like that there were a couple of other things we could have been let in on like the kidnapping and what was going on with that, and just some small things here or there, like I mentioned in my could change, but overall a fantastic film.
Well, I'm gonna go a little higher. Mary and I first watched this, and I didn't get many of the things that were going on, and I probably came out of there saying 4 stars. This was interesting, weird at times, but interesting, and I give it 5 stars because the more I started to read and learn and find out some of these things about, like, this is my introduction to Lynch, and so I'm a little bit hooked, and I can't wait to see more now. And so I don't know where this ranks for you all. Like, what's your favorite David Lynch movie?
Oh, it's a tie between this one and Mulholland for me.
Okay, John?
Probably Mulholland Drive.
Okay. Well, I mean, so for Mary and I, we just loved the mystery. We liked a lot of the themes that were going on. There's a lot of stuff going on in here, and it's really, really interesting. And he doesn't hit you across the face with it. He definitely challenges you to go deeper. But as I enjoyed going into it with you guys here, this has been one of the most fun movies to pick apart.
Well, and that's one of the wonderful things of why we're doing this podcast, actually, is I look forward to kind of maybe thinking my rating over again after a few more watches.
Yeah, and like I said, if I had just watched it once, I would have come in here and told you 4 and been like, and what was that thing about the candle going out? Well, and then you learn about it. It's like, well, that's the darkness taking over. I mean, it's when bad things happen that Frank blows out that candle on the wall after the rape. I mean, and he calls attention to saying, now it's dark. There's just so many things in this movie that it's really impressive to me. Great filmmaking. So I did go 5 here. Like I said, it's not easy watching at times, but it sure is interesting. So
It's not for the faint of heart.
no, I would caution people before they hop into it.
Absolutely.
So this was a lot of fun, but John, it's time to help. What are we going to do for next time?
So next time we are going into the fantasy realm. So first we have The Never-Ending Story from 1984. A troubled boy dives into a wondrous fantasy world through the pages of a mysterious book. We have The Princess Bride from 1987. While homesick in bed, a young boy's grandfather reads him a story called The Princess Bride. And finally, from 1988, we have the movie Willow. A reluctant dwarf must play a critical role in protecting a special baby from an evil queen.
Well, I've seen A Princess Bride so many times. It's a classic, and it begs to be done in this podcast, but I'm going to hold it to another time because I've never seen Willow, and I have seen The Never-Ending Story, but not since I was a kid, and I remember really loving it. Man, this is tough. I really want to do all of these, to be honest with you.
They're all great picks.
They are. I really want to go back and see The Never-Ending Story. Let's go back and do The Never-Ending Story. What do you say?
Let's go back and do a podcast that hopefully ends at one point.
This is the story that never ends. Yes, it goes on and on, my friends.
And now that'll be stuck in my head all night.
So people stop. No. Anyway, DJ, thank you so much for coming. This was
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank y'all. This was great.
Yeah, you guys, you brought a lot of good points. So, and to all of our lords, ladies, and knights of the Retro Movie Roundtable, thank you so much for joining us and listening with us. Please like us on Facebook, reach out to us, and give us an email at retromovieroundtable@yahoo.com. And we really, really appreciate the ratings, reviews, and subscriptions you give us through iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you get to your podcast. That helps us find a new audience and grow the show and build this giant movie-loving community that we're trying to build here. So thank you so much, everybody. As always, be good to each other and watch more movies. John?
Gotta go with another Hopper quote on this one. The man is clear in his mind, but his soul is mad.